Hello, YouTube Sidekick here with a little video in reaction to the 2025 DCS video, or maybe I should say a reaction to the 2025 video. Before I get started, there's a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, I'm continuing to make this kind of video mostly because of the reaction from the folks that have left really constructive comments. I was really impressed on the last video that actually a much higher proportion than usual of the comments were quite considerate and quite constructive. People took some actual time to think about what they wanted to say and to put it into words, and I appreciate that. And because of that, I'm going to continue to provide an opportunity for those kinds of people to weigh in. The second thing I wanted to say, again, I just want to reiterate that my take on these kinds of things about what DCS is and what it's becoming is a bit different, and that's mostly because of my professional background, and I won't bother belaboring that point, but you might want to consider going back and watching my other videos on these kinds of subjects. Hopefully there'll be a link in the video, but there'll also be a link in the description to a playlist where you can do that. You certainly might want to look at the video on expectation management that I did a little while ago, because I am going to refer to some of the stuff in that video in this one. And that's because I fundamentally believe that that is what the DCS video and the follow-up podcast by Wags is about. In other words, when I watch that video, I do not see it as a statement of intent on ED's part. I do not see it as a list of work in progress. I see it as a series of impressions, of messages that ED is trying to send to me and to various parts of the community. So when I watch that video, I don't ask myself, hey, when is that coming? Or, wow, how are they going to do that? I ask myself, why did they put that in there? Like, for instance, why so many shots at night? Anyways, more on that in a minute. So having asked myself that question, I go back and I think about what I talked about in my video on stakeholder management. To recap, and also I go back to thinking about my explanation of what I think DCS's strategy is. So to recap both of those things briefly, I believe that Eagle Dynamics is working to modernize DCS, not only in terms of its look and feel, but also how it's played, and also the historic time period on which it focuses. In other words, I think they want to attract a younger crowd that is less worried about the details of flight sims, with a high-end look, that plays well in multiplayer, and that models conflicts in the early 2000s. They want to then try to convert those new players into sim nerds with the opportunity for more in-depth flight simming in that environment. Now, as far as expectation management is concerned, the main objective of expectation management, on ED's part and anybody else's, is not merely to generate support, positive buzz. The point of expectation management is, on the one hand, to convince supporters to be more supportive and to give them tools and motivation to influence others to also be more supportive. On the other hand, the goal is to contain and isolate detractors so that the rest of the community gives them less influence. So with that in mind, let's take a look at that video and ask ourselves why. Why so many night shots? Well, because the night shots look awesome. They also mimic video that potential players that ED's trying to attack will have seen on the news, and that combined with the dramatic landscape views are all designed to draw in players who yearn to fly the Apache or the Viper or the Hornet in, let's face it, the global war on terror in Afghanistan or Iraq or maybe Syria. Well, that certainly checks a bunch of boxes that I talked about above, particularly since the night shots also do not reveal the less attractive features of the new maps, which are not that attractive when you get down close to the ground and in detail. So those who like the maps can point to these shots and say how great they look, thus telling the detractors to pipe down and go away with their criticism of ED's map choices. Job done. Well, what about all those shots of things like the Corsair and the city of Berlin and all that other stuff that's way outside the strategy that I outlined? Surely this means that World War II DCS is not dead. It's about to make a comeback based on the video, right? Well, I wouldn't get your hope up just yet. It's true that there must be some amount of work in progress on both World War II and the Cold War in Northwest Europe in order for those shots to exist at all. But to me, they are in the video purely to generate that exact reaction. They are there to give supporters something to point to tell the grognards who feel left out of the current strategy to stop whining, because obviously they haven't been forgotten. The fact is that we've been seeing shots of the Corsair, I think at least 2 years, which would tend to reinforce the conclusion that it's not a high priority. It's an active project for sure, but my guess is it's really there just to keep the grogs at bay, rather than because DCS is planning a major pivot to World War II in the Pacific. And remember, I'm not saying this is a question of Eagle Dynamics misleading you. DCS and ED have provided no details about the projects. They've let the viewer invent their own conclusions, and then those supporters disseminate those views to the commentariat. In other words, they empower those who want to take an optimistic view without saying anything that the detractors can call a lie when it takes a while for the new content to appear. Once again, solid job. So what about all those shots of units moving around on maps? Well, clearly, this is meant to give the impression that ED has not forgotten about the dynamic campaign, which heads the list of desired features, especially amongst their supporters, and especially amongst the kind of player that ED is trying to attract. Note, though, that while the impression is given that it's on the way, there are no details of what the actual user interface will be or how it will be implemented. This may mean that it's still a ways away. It also may mean that since the UI and the interface and implementation is always amongst the most contentious topics amongst the commentariat, they have not revealed anything that will start the comment blizzard on how the dynamic campaign should look and feel. And speaking of comment blizzard, that naturally brings us to the F-35. Why was it in the video? Well, I think it's the ultimate expression of what I'm talking about. The presence of the F-35 teaser simultaneously serves to attract new audiences while also giving supporters ammunition to sing ED's praises and to engage the skeptics on fertile ground in which both sides can add heat but absolutely no light to the argument. Which means that it distracts the detractors from continuing to complain about more central issues, like ED's insistence on starting new projects before completing old ones. And, oh my, is it ever succeeding? This is the dominant conversation going on about DCS, and it literally has absolutely nothing to do with anything you or I will see for probably at least a year. So again, solid effort there for sure. So where does that leave us, or at least me, after the big reveal? Did I learn anything? Well, I learned that ED's marketing department has stepped it up a notch. My hat is off to them there. My dog agrees, by the way. Beyond that, I would say that the video confirms my biases for what they're worth. It reinforces the conclusions from my last 2 videos about what Eagle Dynamics' strategy is and the plan by which they are executing it. It does not change my opinion of DCS in the slightest. And I continue to use watching videos like this as a way of managing my expectations primarily. No, DCS is not on its way to becoming the simulator of my dreams. Yes, it is and will continue to be the premier simulation and sandbox of modern air combat. There are other players in the market, but none that can offer everything that DCS does. Yes, I still enjoy playing it. No, I don't enjoy listening to people who have yet to descend the Dunning-Kruger curve far enough that they continue to argue about it when they don't know what they're talking about. My advice, if you want it, is the same as it's always been. It's been repeated by others, but I'm not sure it's been entirely understood, by the way. It's this. Enjoy DCS for what it is and what it is becoming. But don't waste energy wanting it to be something it's not going to be. And really, stop complaining. It won't get you what you want. Unless what you want is an argument. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again soon, and this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.